各位观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看我们美南电视的 JxJ 论坛。Jim Notley, thank you for coming. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Jimmy. Every week it gets more exciting.
Or more terrifying.
Yeah. Our biggest challenge is how to focus down on what we're going to talk about. There's so many things. We could be here literally all night talking about things.
And it's really hard to have any conclusion, I mean, just look at today's news. There's the allegations with the hacked computer in itself that is a legal act and lead to talk about Hunter Biden's Ukrainian. I mean, it's been going on for a while now. There's this kind of things that pop up, and as Americans, it's very hard now, right? 很难去断定什么是真的消息，什么是真的新闻。而且现在新闻这些媒体，他们已经在制造新闻，而不只是在播报新闻。So a lot of the media outlets, instead of reporting the news, in a way they're creating news.
Yeah.
That is problematic, depending on their political affiliation.
Yeah. Much of what appears to be news, or is what I'll call marketed or presented as news, isn't really news. It's people commenting on somebody else's comments. And by the time, it's like when we were in kindergarten, we all started in a circle and people whispered in each other's ear. And by the time it got back, the message was totally distorted. We have a lot of that going on. And so it's very difficult, very difficult.
就像刚刚 Jim 讲的，这个你就像在小学一样，这个媒体现在是报道别人的评论跟评语，但是不能代表说你这个消息是正确，来源是正确，而且是经过公证的。I don't consider the New York Post a media outlet. I consider them paparazzi, and I have to learn to stop drinking the Kool-Aid. Stop reading a lot of these news, no matter what side it's on, from which side of the political spectrum, because it really upsets and creates unnecessary tension and anger. That's what they do, right? They want to create divide and create anger and hatred.
Right. And many of the people who consider themselves reporters, whether they're newspaper or television or radio, want to be personalities themselves and be go-to people for information rather than reporters. And in the newspaper business, there was always the distinction between reporting on one side and editorial on the other. Now everything is intentionally blurred, and television is the worst of all.
Jim 说，这个电视跟这个新闻报道的记者，以前这个编辑部就是写 columnist 写这个专栏的，跟这个新闻部门的记者是分开的，中间是有墙要分开的，这样子才能够公平正确的去报道。但是如果是按照现在这样子的这样走下去，所有的这个新闻记者媒体都混在一起了。Hi, I'm taking live, baby. What are you doing? Close the door, please. Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
No, that's all right.
I don't know why after a year of this COVID lockdown, my kids still want to listen in, because I don't talk about anything else interesting. We're talking about politics and Asian American rights. There's nothing with them. One day when I talk about Disney or something, maybe they can join in.
No, I would take that as a compliment that they're really interested in finding out what you do.
You know what? You're right. I'm very proud of my kids.
Maybe learning, and they're obviously proud of you. So, and maybe learning about what you do and learning from you. So I take that as a compliment.
Well, then I better start I need to set a better example. But let me translate what you said. That was very interesting. 谢谢 Jim 刚刚说，至少我的孩子还会对我做的事情有兴趣，就是他们还是替我感觉到骄傲。So I feel 我感到很开心。Jim 这样跟我讲，但是我现在要以身作则，不能一下子就这个被现在的时局跟政治影响到，因为我一直觉得 I always thought, Jim, as working class Americans, as technically we are, because we were not born with a silver spoon. We don't have a trust fund. We don't come from generations of money. So as working class, we're still working because we work our whole life.
Sure.
We get affected. I mean, we're supposed to, how do I say this? We're moderates, okay? Or at least we're in the middle. We wouldn't sit down here and be able to have conversation or have the connections and networks in our community if we were not pragmatic, if we're not logical.
Right.
So we're supposed to concentrate on our business, on our family, on God, right? And politics, it's something we do our duty. We vote, we learn the issues, but we're not supposed to be too vocal and get too much into it because, how do I say this, right? You don't be a fanatic. But this last 4 years, being a minority, so I cannot force it upon you, Jim. I cannot force you to understand what we're going through, what immigrants are going through, or that emails or this. Every day I get new posts, people sending me or sharing Asian Americans been discriminated. This morning, yesterday it was in New York City. One of the Karens came and said to a Korean lady who's not even Chinese, not like they know the difference, China virus. You brought the virus, go back. We talked about Midland a few months ago, being slashed, cut a child and father because they're and this kind of language that riles people up. Do you think it matters? Do you think when people in power encourages this kind of language, when they say it themselves, do you think because I don't think people understand how much it hurts us. We're all the same, right? To them, we're all the same. To the right wing, the Proud Boys, the KKK, go back. All of the Asians brought the virus. You all need to go back, whether you're American or not, because we're as American as everybody else.
Yeah.
Born and raised here. This is a country built up of immigrants. Why are they creating the divide? I mean, when there was the Spanish flu or Ebola, do you understand where I'm coming from? It's
Jimmy, I know what you're talking about. I've lived with it all my life. It's a lot, believe it or not, it's a lot less so now than it was a generation or two ago. And I'm told that it was a lot worse a generation or two before that. I can remember when I was a kid growing up in California, there were still black and white segregated bathrooms in California, not just in the U.S. South, but in California. I can remember all kinds of racial slurs all the time. And it wasn't too long, when I grew up, it wasn't too long after the internment of Japanese Americans in order to, quote, protect ourselves from Japanese in World War II.
But they are the Japanese Americans.
Yeah. And they were most of them that were interned were U.S. citizens, and they were either born in the United States or naturalized. And what I've always found amazing, there is a strain of racism and discrimination and distrust that runs through not only what I'll call white establishment people, but others as well. And I'll give you an example in just a moment. But what I've always found curious is the people like you and your family, and before the major wave of Asian immigration in the last 20, 30 years, there was, particularly on the East Coast, waves of European and Middle Eastern immigration. And what the people who were born and grew up here fail to recognize is people like you and your family and others from Italy, Israel, Russia, Germany, they're coming to escape the very bad things and tyranny that have led the U.S. into a number of foreign conflicts, including World War I and including World War II. So the people who, ironically, may be among the most patriotic Americans are the recent immigrants. Now, a guy like me can't tell by looking or listening etc. And that's what creates a lot of the distrust. I'll use the word distrust because it really is distrust. But I'll tell you, it's just in the last week, I've been doing work with Korean Americans, and they know my relationship with many Japanese Americans. And they have said directly to me, we don't like you having those relationships.
Jokingly, I hope.
Well, it's said in joke, but as the old adage is, there's a lot of truth in jest. And that's what makes it memorable.
You know the delicate balance between the countries and history. I'm going to come back to that in a bit. It's very interesting to bring up, Jim. But I want to make sure our audience understands what you said in Chinese.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
It's very deep. And it comes from years of, how do I say this? For someone your age, and remember, I am by no means questioning you. You are woke. You know what that means, woke? Because
I think so.
Being from California, you were on the forefront of believing in equal rights, because there's a lot of people that grew up during your time that it could be excused, or the excuse as well. During my time, we could use these words. During my time, I'm used to being segregation. During my time, this or that. Well, times has changed. The reason why this is the greatest country on earth is because we get the best of every country. The escape tyranny to come here.
Right, and people self-select. The people who want to be here try very hard to get here, and they endure and go through a great deal of hardship, and I'll call it investment.
So would you say that equal rights and racial harmony and working together to rebuild our country is above party lines? It's above conservative or liberal doctrines?
Well, not only do I agree with that statement, but I'll follow it with two other things. Number one, I believe that every person should act and lead by example, but the people who are our acknowledged leaders, elected representatives, corporate executives, church and other social leaders should work especially hard to watch their behavior, watch their statements, public statements, private statements as well, because you never know when anything is going to be a hot mic or be slipped or anything else. But it's not just that you should lead by example, is you should be the example. You should bring it within you that's who we are and that's what we are doing. I think that's a very, very important. Very, very important.
That's number one, right? Lead by example. You are basically pointing out the many mishaps and failures of certain leader of the free world right now, and I appreciate that by being throwing this kind of shade is smoother than me just yelling and screaming about it. This more people will accept. More people will be, oh yeah, that's fair, you know. So let me tell our audience what you grew up in.
Okay.
Jim 长大的时候是 what is it? Probably the 70s, 60s and 70s?
Yeah, 50s and 60s.
50s and 60s.
By the 70s, I was in college, so 50s and 60s. 50年代60年代因为 Jim 现在70 What do you mind if I ask you in your 70s, right? So no, I'm 68 now. I was born in 1952.
Okay, so growing up in 50s and 60s, that makes sense. 50s and 60s. So Jim 在1950年代、1960年代的时候，那个时候的美国跟现在是不一样的。他还记得这个segregation， 就是少数民族跟白人的这个分隔，不能上学，不是不一样的学校，就是很多种族的这个歧视跟限制。他自己记得这个民权这个示威，他也记得当初20世界大战之后，这个美国裔的日本日裔的美国人被关到集中营。虽然是美国生的美国长的，因为那学的是 enemy。你知道，身为华人，我们那时候我们的心情其实很复杂，因为日本那时候是侵略者，但是在美国他们被当成天蝎，你知道吗？这个是在宪法上是不可以解释、不可以宽容的。好不容易过了60几年，加州才正式的，美国才正式的跟这些后裔道歉，但是也经过了华裔团体很多的努力。 我们要讲到就是刚刚 Jim 讲的，他这个成长的过程，他看到这些，所以他的这个年代的很多人都是怎么说呢？就是我们你知道老人家年长的很多都会说我们那个年代就是这样子讲话，我们这个不是歧视，这是我们当年这种生活的方式。Jim 不是这种，因为他经商，他全世界都走过，所以他更了解到种族裔的和谐跟美国是移民国家，全世界各地的移民最顶尖的移民都来到这里，才让美国可以强大。他也觉得说，所有这个逃离自己国家的灾难，远离这些灾难，就是第一次世界大战、第二次世界大战，还有我们后来越战、韩战这个移民来到这边是为了安居乐业，是为了离开他们家乡，我们家乡的这个动乱。所以我们在这边更是要感谢移民。You would say that we appreciate our immigrants. We should not divide them. We should not make them feel like they're not part of the society.
No, not. May I interrupt you?
Of course, please.
Not only that, I am one kind of guy who objects to the terminology of what others call hyphenated Americans. I believe everyone, once they become a citizen, maybe even once they become a permanent green card holder, are Americans. And that's all that matters. And I'm very distressed by the current social activity, what I think is part of, quote, divide and conquer, where everybody has to go into their little groups. And I thought Barack Obama, during the 2008 campaign, said it beautifully. He said, we are not a Black America, a white America, an Asian America. We are the United States of America. Now, that was beautiful, and everybody in the audience said that's a wonderful way to say it. They got standing ovations to everything else for a very long time. That was a centerpiece of his campaign back in 2008. But that philosophy seems to have been withered away, and now we're all moving into different areas, and I find that very distressing. And I as you know, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I find it very distressing. That's why I said there's so many things that we know is wrong that we agree on. But I hate to break this. I hate to make it seem like I am towing the party line. It's not about party. There's one political party.
It's not party.
It's not about politics. But Jim, the fact is, being involved, being educated on local elections, there's one party that specifically do not want Asian. They don't include Asian. They call us chinks. They call us straw Asians, and they don't apologize for it. They don't respond to our emails. They don't respond to our events.
Yeah.
There's one party that does that. Another party that specifically tries to include diversity, that include 60% of their people that are running for office, 60% are minorities. But there's one party that is 95% Caucasian. There's a reason, Jim. This is why I'm frustrated. I want balance. Why can't we all agree? Because it's above politics that race should not be the reason why. You should not make yourself seem like we don't need your vote. It's a fortress. When it's official word, fortress mentality. Follow our president. Immigrants, bad. Mexicans, drug users, dealers. I mean, these labeling, it works during a campaign, like say in the Republican primary. When you label line Ted, when you label like Hillary, it works, like in a game show, childish, like you said, in the playgrounds, kindergarten. Mm-hmm. But this is, our people, like you and me, we don't want to hear that kind of stuff.
No, we don't.
It's bullying. It's
Jimmy, as you know, I'm politically mostly conservative, social issues, quite open, flexible. I refrain from using the word liberal, but okay, you know what I mean.
You're open-minded, you're progressive, you believe in
open and flexible. And my conservatism comes really from two other dimensions. One is fiscal responsibility, and the other is strength in foreign policy, defense activity, for obvious reasons. But I am not, and most of the time I vote, not totally, but most of the time I vote Republican. But I don't consider myself a strong partisan because I see from the inside exactly what you're talking about. And I can give you introductions to Hispanic people, African-American people, other special people who I consider very, very important, Jewish people, who feel aggrieved in exactly the same way that you're talking about. And I don't think for most Republicans, I don't think that they are intentionally hostile to immigrants or intentionally hostile or trying to discriminate. I think they're indifferent, and they forget that their behavior can be misunderstood and misconstrued by not answering things, by not welcoming people, by using sloppy language, by writing inappropriately. And it's very, very, it's not only damaging to everyone around, including people who are on the other end of the discrimination, but it backfires. It's damaging to them, and it's damaging to the initiative of communicating other conservative values.
Can I tell you why that you said they're not mindful, or what's the word you used, that they're not careful? Is that what you said? Apologize.
They're not careful. They're not cautious.
They're not cautious. Okay.
They're not sensitive.
Not sensitive. Okay. This is America. Whether it's changing corporate laws or civil rights or anything that you want, any kind of social change, it takes effort. The squeaky wheel gets clean. This is the American mantra. You work hard, you talk about it, you get on the soapbox, and things get done. You elect the officials to represent your interests. We'll talk about elections a little bit, whether you voted. But I will never question who you vote for or ask you what your affiliation is. That's your personal choice. But I want to go back to why the certain party don't care. It's not being sensitive. It's not. When you're not forced, nobody, even me or you, if there is no IRS, I wouldn't pay taxes. But because there are laws, I pay taxes. Well, the cops told me because there are laws that says I cannot drive higher than 70, so I drive 70. Or else with my car, I'll drive 120, if I like, right, to test out my car. The fact is, there are rules for a reason. And the reason why a certain party don't care about the rules is no one enforces it, because Asian Americans, specifically Chinese Americans, do not vote. We have, let's say, 19% of Fort Bend County is Asian. No, that's a bad. Let's say 5% of the total Texas population is Asian American. Only 3%, 60% is registered to vote. Out of those, maybe 1/3 votes. So this is America. Your campaign donations matter, but votes are the most important. Every vote. If you don't vote, you won't get nothing. They will keep on putting you to the side. And there are always these Asian Americans, which is scary, Jim. I hate to say this. They joined this certain party to be willingly used as the straw Asians. They don't represent mainstream Asian interests. They're rejected by the Asian community. Basically, they're the sellouts. But they know they cannot get patted on the back with the party that are inclusive. So they run to the other side, hoping that they can run and be the strong Asian to show, hey, look, like the straw black guy, right? There's always like that. Yeah, I have that one black friend. Look, I have that one Asian. Doesn't work like that. And it's frustrating because this is election season. We see it happening and it's getting worse. To be honest with you, 10 years ago, it wasn't like this. 6 years ago, it wasn't like this. There was not so much divide and hatred and amongst the racial lines. I know what happened to the Middle Eastern community after 9/11. Even though they're Americans, this is happening to us. And one day it could turn to be on you or our Jewish friends and I can't imagine what our black friends and Hispanic friends have gone through their entire life. You grew up during that kind of segregation. We never could go back to that, Jim. We cannot.
No, nobody wants to. And I think one of the consequences of this is there's a real schizophrenia in the United States now about ethnic or whatever we call it, diversity. For instance, Black people will refer to themselves as Black or African Americans. if I refer to somebody as Black or African American, it often is interpreted as a pejorative statement. Well, why did you? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. My observation is we should celebrate our diversity. When I was a kid growing up on a farm, my classmates in school were first generation or second generation from the Philippines, from Japan, 4 or 5 generations from China because of the former coolie labor that was indentured servants that built much of California. And from all over Europe, Italian, Poles, German, everybody kind of, and we had people from the Middle East as well, and all over Latin America, as you can imagine, in California. And everybody came together, and they'd refer to each other, oh, that Portuguese guy, or that so-and-so. And, people, it was almost like a nickname. And it wasn't harmful or anything else. In fact, in some cases, it was an expression of affection. But right now, it's extremely sensitive, and it's too bad. In some respects, I think we're going backwards. You and I are talking about
Thank you.
Backwards.
I really appreciate it, because I don't want our audience and a lot of our friends would think. Remember, this is not toward you. It's the perception that certain people your age or in your racial profile only belong to a certain party. And that party does not want immigrants and they're racist. The narrative has been led that way from both sides, and that's not fair. We do have a lot of Americans that are like yourself, that vote by candidate. So do I. I vote by candidate. It should not be party line. But this election, once again, is clear. There's one party that do not care for your interests or mine. That we're supposed to talk about COVID today, Jim. We never even got there. Why is that? Because what are we going to talk about? The numbers keep going up. People forgot. Look up the numbers. The news gave up. What is there to talk about? The numbers keep going up. Fall is coming, but if we talk about it's conspiracy, we're scaring people. Well, 220,000 deaths are not fake. No one's scared. That's real death. My friends that work in the hospitals, nurses are telling us it is not fake. It's getting worse. The president got sick. He didn't have to wait like us. If we got sick, like my friends that got sick that I know personally how it went through, they don't put you on a ventilator. They don't give you experimental drugs. You don't get airlifted to a hospital. They send you home because they don't want you to affect other people. You sit there trying to beat it. If you don't beat it and you can't breathe, then you get on a ventilator. For my friend, it took 3 weeks. He can't breathe. It feels like jello in his lungs. Almost died. Like, you cannot compare the president's experience with what we will experience. Yeah, he recovered, but he also has the best care. So this is from a disease that he made fun of, that he slighted, that he did not control. So I don't want to go back to that again, Jim, because it's nonstop. We don't even talk about COVID. What's the point? But I do want to tell everyone, 尤其是我们的中文的观众, census, the courts have struck down census, and today is the last day instead of October. Guys, the Texas populations has changed in the last 20 years. Asians, I have the numbers, official numbers. Asian American Pacific Islanders in Houston has grown. The latest numbers we have is from 2017. In 2010, we have 960,000.
In Texas?
Yeah, 2010. This is from official census. A lot of people don't fill out census though. 2017 is 1.4 million. We have the highest growth, plus 42%. And this is before the last 3 years numbers have tallied, because so many people moved from California to here, especially Asians, to escape the high taxes or what they perceive as unfair liberal government. All of the Caucasian race has basically no change in 17 years, in 7 years. African Americans plus 16, Hispanic plus 18, totals plus 13% moving to Texas. But seriously, plus 42% is explosive. That's why the government don't want Chinese Americans, Asian Americans to fill out the census, because this is how they decide where you get your tax dollars, your public service, your police officers, your education, how many schools, how many roads. $15,000 per person that do answer to the census. These are official data, okay, from Census Bureau. They don't want you to vote. They don't want you to vote, or they don't want you to fill out census because a certain population already is getting the benefits. The numbers are the same. It's disproportionate. But the minorities, the folks are not educated. They don't have the access to vote or to fill this out. Then their money is gone. So folks, 请你做人口普查，一个人拿15000块钱，中文电话，你打电话去，10分钟就做完了，5个问题而已，844-391-2020。Give them a call. Be counted, please. This is federal government. This is the census. They're not taking the information. They're not going to report you. It's very simple. It's separated. I promise you, it is as simple as one phone call. 844-391-2020 in Mandarin Chinese. 今天是最后一天. Today's the last day. Before midnight, please give them a call. This is very important. And I hope everyone goes out to vote. I really pray that you voted and you registered to vote because this is, every election is important. But this one, particularly in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of unprecedented chaos, it's time to go vote. Protect our rights. Protect me and Jim. We're going to protect everyone too. Do our duty. It's a privilege to vote. Like Jim said, 身为移民，我们更加的爱国，我们更加的能够享受到这个自由与民主。We're more appreciative. We should be more appreciative of the freedom that's provided for us. So we have to do our duty because it's a privilege to vote. It's not a right. The rights were fought for by the blood of the military. 这些我们很多这个战争，很多这个英雄流了血，为了能保护我们可以投票的权利与自由。所以请大家去投个票。Jim, I appreciate you. I know you will vote. You know I'll vote. We'll talk about the voting process next week, perhaps. I'm still deciding when and where because I have to make sure my entire family goes out to vote.
Oh, well, interesting. Can I mention one other thing about this ethnic discussion, immigration?
Yeah.
You've made some points about the Republican Party, et cetera. One of my biggest disappointments about the failure of Republican leadership has been its inability to deal with the broken immigration system that we have. We need to distinguish between legal immigration and illegal immigration. When everyone speaks about immigration today, particularly the news media, they forget to add an important adjective because they always discuss illegal immigration. That's what they mean when they rage against the inequities and the breaking of the law and all of this. But the only way we will ever fix illegal immigration is to fix legal immigration first. And while the Republicans during George Bush's time or during early part of Donald Trump's time had majorities in both houses as well as in the White House, they were unwilling or unable to pull this all together. I'm in the real estate development business, and one of the things I hold most close is the saying, demographics drive everything. And they do. They drive everything worldwide. They drive everything in local real estate markets. And what we need to do is to fix our system because our legal system is severely broken. And with it go all kinds of other things. So right now we are in a panic with this pandemic, all the other kinds of things. This is not the most urgent priority, but I would argue for our long-term future, it is one of the most important priorities. We must do this. And we have other demographic issues as well. You mentioned in your statistics a few minutes ago that the white or the Caucasian population in Texas hadn't changed over the last decade. That's because we don't have enough babies. And that is a very serious issue. We in the United States, like most developed countries in the world, Northern Europe, Japan, etc., our replacement is going down. And we comfort ourselves by saying, oh, well, we're still growing because of immigration and because of the children of immigrants. Okay, I understand the math. I understand that just fine. But the entire economic structure of the country and the world is based on growth. And it is impossible to grow if you don't grow your demographic pyramid. And all you have to do is look at a country like Japan, and you can see the future. And it's very, very frightening.
It's very frightening. You're absolutely right. I actually do follow up on this. Japan actually pays you, if you have a baby, they pay you a pretty significant money. I think $20,000 US dollars just to have a baby. Singapore does that. I believe Taiwan is starting to do that. I know certain Northern European countries do that. It seems like the more educated you are in a developed country, the more maybe you feel the pressure. The world is so crazy. So less children.
Well, there's a direct link.
Yeah,
there's a terrible thing to say.
Upside down.
Fertility falls when opportunities for women rise. And it's perfectly understandable. Okay. But we shouldn't let the micro endanger the macro. And
yes. Well, I think the way that men and women's duties are assigned has changed. We have to understand that. Men needs to be able to understand that they could provide for their children and stay at home and be a stay-at-home dad, and there should not be any shame in that.
No,
I know a lot of people that do that. Or for the men, they have to, like, society has to at least not discriminate. Because we're men. I cannot stay home and I'll go crazy with the kids. But if needed, if I had to, why is it that only women can stay home? They have to stay home taking the kids. No. Why can't they have to? Your wife is a dentist. She is a professional. She's one of the first ones in the military. Her job was just as strenuous and important as yours, maybe even more. But you both committed.
Anyways, more, yeah.
But you both committed. You both put in the time. That's what is hard right now. It's like you said when you bring it up. We can do a whole show about that, Jim. Okay. But we always don't have enough. We never have enough time for a show. So thank you for coming in.
We're running out of time now. One last thought. That's one of the reasons why I like Amy Coney Barrett as a Supreme Court nominee, because she's not only a great legal scholar, but she is a great example of a full personality person, not woman, but full person. So
I fear for all my female family and friends. Mm-hmm. I fear for all the women out there. But we shall see. We shall see. This is a process. There's nothing we could do at this time, at this point. Go vote, guys. Please go vote and do your census.
Next week?
Can't wait.
Okay. Thank you, Jimmy.
Take care, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.